to the point with Russia where we weren't reaching the same goal.
So
Hold on one second.
I mean, Kerry would have had to have informed his counterpart of this. That's what I'm trying to ask.
So what I'm saying is we had direct communication with the Russians. The Russians were informed.
Today? Or over the weekend?
It was my understanding that that decision was taken today.
So given that this is now a suspension of talks, does this mean full-blown military warfare going on?
It's pulled in views from across the entire interagency, and that's not just the diplomatic approach, where we've obviously been very focused, but also financial experts, military, as we said.
Just to follow up on Leslie's thing on, did the Secretary
No call to read out on
okay, because apparently they had several calls in the last since Saturday, like 3 on Saturday, maybe a couple yesterday, in fact, maybe today, and so on.
Okay, I don't have any discussion on that to read out.
How is that likely to affect what is going on today at the Security Council, for instance? There's a meeting, there's a French proposal. What is your position on all this? Does that throw it completely out of realm of discussion or possibilities?
Well, I would note that this is a suspension of bilateral engagement with Russia. It's not the end of multilateral engagement through the UN or through the ISSG. I'm not going to get ahead of that. In terms of any French proposal at the UN Security Council, of course, we'd refer you to the French. Our goal, as we've said, has always been clear. We're looking for ways where we can build that, or establish, frankly, reestablish at this point, because let's be clear, there's no cessation of hostilities. So reestablish that cessation of hostilities. Get that full impeded humanitarian access. These have always been our strongest points, and thus create that space where political dialogue can happen.
And lastly, I know many have many questions on this, but as Leslie said, I mean, this unfriending, I don't know what you want to call it, this lack of communication now, does that put you in a position where it is likely to have some sort of a conflict between Russian and American airplanes?
You're asking me for hypotheticals.
Because you said something about maintaining the communication channel.
The deconfliction through the Department of Defense.
Right, but so that remains. Does that
Correct.
also? So the Russian attacks may still remain, correct?
Well, you're asking me about what Russia's planning on doing in Syria?
I'm asking because this is an ongoing thing. I mean, you're saying that the reason you nullified or suspended these talks is because the Russians have not been true to form. They have not met their obligations and so on.
Exactly.
So they are likely to continue with these attacks and so on. Is the United States likely to counter those attacks in any way?
I'm not going to get ahead of this decision taken today. I mean, I want to reiterate, this was not a decision, I think, as you all know, that we took lightly. This is it's a grave decision. We're very much considering next steps. As I said, this does not preclude multilateral dialogue, but we felt that it had come to an end. Dave, you had questions?
If the multilateral dialogue, you say, continues, the co-chairs of the ISSG are Russia and the United States.
Correct.
Now, you're co-chairs of a multilateral body, but to work as an effective chair, you must maintain conversations on that. So will calls continue on ISSG? Regardless of still as co-chairs?
So it's my understanding, we are open to working towards our end goals on that through multilateral efforts. What ended today was the bilateral engagement.
Right, but in order to arrange, for example, a meeting of the ISSG, then Secretary Kerry will have to call Foreign Minister Lavrov.
Yeah, I think that those sort of logistical details can probably be worked out.
I think what we're trying to figure out here, Elizabeth, is what impact does this have then on the battleground? I mean, you've got the Syrian army backed by the Iranian backed militia. You've got the Russian airplanes. What impact is this going to have on fighting on the ground? Does the US step up its support for the opposition? Do you try and push back on eastern Aleppo, try to hold that? How does this translate?
So I'm not going to get ahead of any sort of military decisions or frankly battlefield tactics that may be considered. The focus that the U.S. has had is the fight against Daesh, and we remain committed. I would say that you've seen tremendous gains within the last year on that, and also our focus to helping those most in need within Syria. In terms of how this impacts the Russians' tactics, You'd have to speak to the Russians. Clearly, they had not pulled back. Clearly, they had not stopped their attacks, nor had the regime. So that's a conversation I think you would have with them.
Would the U.S. push back at, for example, the Saudis or anyone else arming, now really stepping up
I
to
wouldn't get
arming
into
the-
sort of that granular talks that we have with partners in the region. What I would say is what we said last week. We're aware that partners and allies are taking a look at a number of options. We remain in close contact with them. Hold on, wait. Guyan had a question, and then I'll get to you guys. Guyan, we'll keep it short, okay?
Yes, you said Russia did not live up to its obligations under the deal. Did the U.S. fully live up to its obligations?
We believe we did. As we said, though, your question, I think, is the marbleization of the opposition with Nusra. Am I leaning too far into that?
Did the U.S. separate the rebels from terrorists as it said it would?
As we talked about last week, the United States continued to have detailed, ongoing discussions with members of the opposition, emphasizing our view on the importance of demarbalizing, of pulling part from Nusra. Our view on that is Nusra is al-Qaeda in Syria. They are a terrorist group. As we said, it was never going to be fast. It was never going to be easy, and we were working hard towards that goal.
In the few days of the ceasefire, did the U.S. get leading rebel groups to abide by that ceasefire? Because right away, the second
one of the
largest
things that
rebel
we've
group-
always been clear that if they were attacked, opposition groups have the right to defend themselves.
But they said right away that they were not going to abide by the ceasefire, and in fact,
And that
they
was a
attacked.
conversation we
Did
had,
you
and if
expect-
they were attacked, they had a right to defend itself. Let's do one more, and then I'm going to move
Did you expect a
around.
unilateral ceasefire, considering the fact that the second largest rebel group right away from the beginning of the ceasefire refused to abide by it, specifically in
We
Aleppo?
expected good faith efforts from not only the opposition forces on the ground as we continue to have dialogue, but also Russia as a proponent of the September 9th ceasefire. So the September 9th agreement. So yeah, we did expect action.
Go back to the deal on September 12th. What would have changed? Would the leading rebel groups abide by the ceasefire? Would the U.S. be able to separate the terrorists from the rebels?
I think you're asking hypotheticals on this. What we wanted to see is we wanted to see both sides make a concerted effort and exert influence where they could. And according to our view, according to, as you can tell, our action today, we do not believe that Russia did that. Go ahead.
Can you confirm? You referred to it slightly. Like before this deal, there was a cooperation between Russia and U.S.
There were talks, there were dialogue.
No, there were so that there is no friendly fire kind of.
Oh, you're
a thing.
talking about the deconfliction, which
Yes.
is out of the Department of Defense.
Yes, but that still goes on.
Yes.
Okay. So
Okay.
Can I
Syed,
just
of
very
course.
quickly follow up? Because there was a leak was made on some point that the secretary made with the opposition and so on. How would you sort of juxtapose the decision today against what has been leaked?
Well, so
How would you?
So on the leak, or the audio that was reported,
audio, right.
we're going to decline to comment on what was a private conversation that the secretary had. I will note, though, that the secretary was very pleased to have a chance to meet with this group of Syrians, to hear their concerns firsthand, and to focus on ending this war. In terms of some of the conversations, I'm just not going to unpack
I'm going
much
to
more.
comment on the fact or on what has been alleged that he said that you guys are going to, let's say, open and fair elections, including Assad, correct?
Our position on Assad has not changed. We believe that Assad has lost legitimacy to lead Syria.
Yeah, but if you feel that a fair and transparent election could be conducted in Syria, that he can join.
We've always said that this is up to the Syrian people. It's up for the Syrian people to create the mechanics in that transition. Certainly, the international community stands with them as they do that. But this is a question for the Syrians. But our position on Assad has not changed. Let's finish up on Syria, and then I know there's a lot more. We'll do two, Guyan, and then we're going to close this out, okay?
What is the U.S. strategy in Syria now without cooperation with Russia?
So as I noted, it's the bilateral discussions with Russia. The suspension has happened. We will continue to talk with members of the international community through other multilateral fora. In terms of next steps, in terms of where we go, you know, this happened today. I'm not going to get into hypotheticals on where we may be, but I do want to be clear that we've had these discussions within the U.S. government across the whole range of facets of U.S. power. We continue to have these discussions with partners and allies.
Does the U.S. have a plan to fight al-Nusra in Aleppo? Because this was part of
our view, as we've said, Nusra is al-Qaeda in Syria. They are a terrorist organization. You know, we continue to have conversations with those moderate opposition groups on the ground about the importance of demarbalizing, of pulling apart.
And other than conversations, is there?
You know, it's a terrorist organization, and we will continue to fight it. So one more, and then let's wrap this because there's so much news.
There were reports today that one of the Nusra leaders was killed. Could you confirm that, or could you tell us
So
about
I've
that?
seen that. I believe the Department of Defense and also my colleague at the White House has spoken on this, so I'd refer you to their comments, Syed. Are we going to stay on Syria, or are we? I'm sorry?
Turkey.
Okay, can we go to Turkey, and then we'll go. Are you on Syria, Abigail?
Yes, I was just wondering, there were also reports of more chemical weapon attacks over the weekend, if that played any role in this decision?
I think what you've seen is sort of a cumulative number of issues that led to our decision today. So we're going to go to Turkey. Are we good? Thanks, guys.
Yeah, the Turkish government shut down a number of television stations, including a station for children. Most of the television stations were broadcasting in Kurdish language or for other minority groups. Are you concerned about this latest crackdown on
We've
the
spoken,
media, including children television?
So I've seen those reports, and we've spoken to this issue, many times within this briefing room. Freedom of press is a fundamental pillar of our view in our own democracy and also in Turkey's democracy. It's enshrined in Turkey's own constitution. We understand that as Turkey continues to take steps to recover from the failed coup, that it will take a look at a number of issues. On this, though, we would reemphasize our view on the importance of freedom of expression, freedom of the press, freedom of access to information.
Are you directly not calling on your ally that it's gone too far in this case? I mean, shutting down a children's television station or accusation
I
that
would reiterate what we said. This is
supporting
enshrined
terrorism?
in Turkey's own constitution. This isn't a U.S. issue. This is an issue, in fact, for the Turkish people. We've made our views well known. I think others around the international community have as well. More on Turkey.
Turkey.
Let's do one more on Turkey, and then I'll come to you, Leslie.
Over the weekend, the Turkish president stated that Turkey will be involved in the battle to retake Mosul and, quote, no one can prevent us from participating. The Iraqi government has objected, and what is your position on this?
Okay, so thanks for the question. As we've said before, the Mosul operation will be Iraqi-led. The coalition continues to work closely with the government of Iraq on all aspects of the operation. That includes military, humanitarian, stabilization, and governance after ISIL is driven from the city. All of Iraq's neighbors need to respect Iraqi sovereignty and territorial integrity. That is the premise that the global coalition to fight ISIL operates under in Iraq, and we expect all of our partners to do the same. I note that Turkey is a key member of the counter-ISIL coalition. We'll continue to work with them, and we'll coordinate with them as they also seek to achieve their national security goals.
Can I follow up on Mosul?
Okay, sure.